All right, folks, another awesome episode of the Broadcast podcast today where we cover part 2 on our series of why you should consider using a buyer's agent. And Ben, what else do we cover?
Mate, you have an awesome chat with Twee, who talking about his recent experience in the marketplace and the advantages of using a buyer's agent. So really excited to cover off of that. And finally, at the end of the show, what's making property news? We're going to be talking about inflation and rents. What's the story? Has rents kept up with inflation? We'll find out.
Lots to cover, folks. Let's rip in now.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, mate, welcome back to the podcast. How are you this week?
Mate, I'm okay. Obviously, very happy with the great game of football last Friday night. How good was that game of footy? Irrespective of whether you barrack for the Pies or not, it was a ripper. It was a good game of footy.
No.
Do you agree?
No, didn't see it, mate. Didn't see it.
Mate, do yourself a favour.
I did rewind the last 2 minutes. Hey, mate, you've been struggling with an eye complaint for the last few weeks, but
yes.
And you're kind of one-eyed. Is it a bit early for those?
Yeah. No, I've got that. A few of my mates have said, "Oh, you're a one-eyed Collingwood supporter." We don't need another one-eyed Collingwood supporter, but yes, I've gone through the Mason Cox journey of a partially detached retina, which needed to be repaired. And I'm post-op from that. And so, yes, if you wanted to look at my eye today, you would lose your lunch. Yeah. So best that we move on.
Yeah, shout out to those people listening whilst eating right now. So
yes.
Hey, yes. So your football team is going well. I mean, you did get a fixture from a bottom 6 side, not a top 6 side. So it's pretty much just layups.
Wait a minute, who have we got over the next 2 weeks?
Hey, you got Carlton.
We played Melbourne twice and beat them twice. Yeah. We had Geelong. We were winning by 30 points. I
asked for that, so I'm going to time
We've got Sydney and Carlton, so there we go. Anyway, we're all good.
Yeah. Well, here's to you.
And good win from your boys too. I did watch a bit of that game.
Oh, that's
post-op,
unique from a Collingwood supporter.
Yeah, I just felt you had control of that game pretty much from the second quarter onwards.
Mate, it's not navel gazing at the moment. You're lifting your eyes and seeing that someone else does exist. I like it. Hey, last week's ep agreed some good feedback around that, Ben. Today is part 2 on that particular episode. So looking forward to leaning in on that. We got some feedback being helpful last week. We're going to dive a bit deeper today on some of the ways that a buyer's agent will help. So I'm looking forward to that. But before we get there, Ben, I'm going to go Mindset Minute. It's a combined mindset and life hack today, Ben. And I am going to do a life hack later, so I'm not cheating. But,
okay. All right, double up.
It's something that, it's a participation one with you, Ben, so I'm interested in your feedback. But I understand the benefits of gratitude, right? I understand that it is an amazing way to frame up your mind. But if I'm totally honest, Ben, I find it difficult to actually feel it in my body when I'm grateful. So I sit there and I'll think, what am I grateful for? Because to be honest, I have a lot to be grateful for. But just feeling it in my body, I find it really difficult if I'm honest. So because I know that positivity is like Teflon and negativity is like Velcro. So for example, I'll ride with my mate. We go down to Bells Beach and back. It's like an epic viewing all the way up to the Ironbark Basin and back right. But sometimes we have to stop there and reflect and go, how good is this? And then we look back to Torquay Point and I really just got to drill in and so, but I don't feel in my body. So here's a reflection for me on that is that when you look at an old photo with nostalgia, you'd give anything to be back there right now. The other day I was looking for some photos when the boys, when they were young. I'm like, look, I'd give anything to go back and just spend another week with them at that age, just because I was busy and blah, 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 traveling, when you were 20, all you wanted to be was a millionaire. Now you're a millionaire, all you want to be is 20. So in that frame of mind, here's the paradigm shift that I have found that worked, and I've been testing it for the last couple of weeks, and it does work. I can feel it in my body. Here it is. So imagine yourself, Ben, as the 85-year-old version of yourself. You might have arthritis in your fingers. You might not be as mobile as you once were. You might not be able to climb stairs for whatever reason. Your family might not get to visit you as often as you'd like. You don't get to see the boys as often as you like. And really, once you set the frame up of that's what I could be like, and then you discount it back to how I am today. Oh, I don't have arthritis in my fingers. I do get to see my boys every day. I do get to do purposeful work. At some point in the future, Ben, you and I won't spend every week riffing this podcast. And we will want to be back to this day right now that we are in, going, oh, geez, I wish I could just do that again and spend time talking about a topic with a mate of mine, riffing it each week. So that has been something that I have found that actually works. I actually do feel it in my body, Ben. That was something that I wanted to sort of reflect on, share with the community around gratitude. For those folks who find the art and the practice of gratitude easy, I envy you. But this is what I found that works.
Yeah, look, I'm similar. I'm very future orientated. I don't get too comfortable standing in one position at any one time. And so, yeah, gratitude. Oh, yeah. God, how could you not be grateful for the wonderful country that we live in and the opportunity that everyone has in front of them if they reach out and take it. So, yeah, I'm guilty of moving on pretty quickly from events and those types of things. But yeah, since probably last year where I was able to do that travel and I'm doing a lot more of the sort of things that I plan to do, I'm definitely feeling a lot more connection to those moments and those events. So thank you for reminding me of that. Very good one.
And mate, when you're 85, you might look back at these times and say, remember when Collingwood won 12 in a row? Because it's never happened again for the next 30 years. So, mate, it's
nice segue. Like that one. Not like that one.
So, folks, try it for yourself. See if that works. Imagine yourself as a future version of yourself where you don't have the same mobility, you don't have the same pain-free, you don't have the same amount of people around you. Just project yourself into that. And it does bring an internal smile. It has worked for me. See if it works for you. So, on the context of gratitude, Ben, I've got a favor to anyone who's got value from this podcast. I'd love for them to share episode 400, please, because that is a podcast that helps you get grateful very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And so we as a podcast, blessed with the community that we've built, but we're still a secret, Ben. So we're asking for the people who have been disciples of the Property Couch now for a number of years, that if you wouldn't mind sharing the podcast, episode 400 is very, very easy to share. So share it with someone that you value who could do with a bit of reflection on how good they've got it, based on the story that Michael shared with us. So all you need is click on episode 400, Ben. If you're in iTunes, there's 3 dots at the top, allows you to share the episode. If you're in Spotify, there's a share icon. If you're on Android, there'd be something very similar. But send it to 2 friends that you think could do with hearing a story of inspiration and help to adopt a mindset of gratitude as well. So I saw this on our reviews, Ben. It was from India 21 Alpha. I said, can't believe this is free. I've been listening to the Property Couch for 3 years. I've read both books, and I put all the lessons I learned into purchasing 3 investment grade properties. As of 2022, my portfolio has appreciated around 40% across the board, and I'm receiving around 4 to 4.5% yield. Now we just sit back and let the location and time do the heavy lifting. Simply the greatest podcast on Australian property investment. Now, Ben, I'm pretty certain that person is not someone that we've met. If we have, please correct me on that. But these principles that we are putting out via the podcast allows people to set themselves up for the future, which is why currently we want to share it with more people. It is a secret. So if you can actually share this episode, share episode 400 with a couple of your friends, we would appreciate that. So there was a bit in that one, Ben, but I think it's useful given that the people who are the most grateful in life, generally the ones who have the most joy in the here and now and the everyday. So, all right.
Love it.
Let's rip in part 2. Should you use a buyer's agent now that the market has turned? I just want to recap on the 3 reasons why we suggested last week that you should do this, Ben. The top 3 reasons. Number 1, the herd is nervous. Number 2, the war chest is getting raided. And number 3, the mirage in the desert around good property is still hard to get your hands on. So that is the context on why we think that you should consider a buyer's agent. But we did the what last week. We're going to do a little bit of the how this week, and in particular, dive into the benefits, Ben.
I think it's really important, Bryce. I mean, we're passionate about this subject. If you don't take action, you're not going to move forward. There's not much you can be hopefully, grateful for if you're not, again, doing those types of things that are really important to people. So, mate, I'm pumped about sort of closing out this episode on the how to, when it comes to this type of stuff. So let's get into this big list of hopefully great little tips and things you can take away when it comes to the other side of why you'd use a buyer's agent.
And stick around, folks. We've got a winter series guest returning to talk about their experience with recently adding to their portfolio. So definitely hang around for that. That is well and truly worth it. But okay, so last week we talked about this 5 broad groups of benefits that you can get from using a buyer's agent. They were experience, negotiation, emotional guidance, time saving, and saving money. So let's have a look at in a couple of those in a bit more detail. So the experience one, Ben. We said last week that in the name of the buyer's agent gives you a clue. They buy, they're professional buyers, so they know how to buy. So a couple of things that you want to be diving into is working out how many transactions have they done, because doing a transaction is highly stressful. We'll talk about that shortly. It's intricate. There's a lot more involved than just looking online at a portal and putting an offer in. So the number of transactions that someone has done is actually really, really important, so that you know that they have got the runs on the board and the experience. The other thing that's also helps to amplify that is the question of whether they've actually purchased themselves, Ben. Now, not 100% critical, but it's always really helpful, because if someone's internalized the feeling of going through the purchasing process, and I say that because there's a number of buyer's agents out there who are applying their craft and know what they're doing, but they haven't actually done it themselves. So they don't know what that feels like. I feel like the combination of experience, having done a bunch of transactions, and having done it yourself means that you can have the technical craft knowing what it is, but also understand the emotional process that you go through when you buy.
Yeah, and if I build on that, Bryce, from my point of view, there's different types of transactions, right? Like ultimately, when you start thinking about set to buy, private treaty, best offer, boardroom auctions, actual live auctions, in-room auctions, there's different ways in which property is transacted in this country. And quite simply, it's very hard if you're only buying one every 7 to 10 years, which is the average, to be able to develop skills and muscle memory in terms of how to do that type of work. So for me, there is no substitute for that experience that you're getting when you're transacting and you're doing that over and over. And you're, especially for auction, bidding, that's, there is a lot of tension and a lot of stress for a lot of people who do that. But if you do that professionally over time, it's not your first rodeo. You'll know some of the nuances and the ways in which the auctioneer is trying to lead the auction. And your job is to try and ensure that you're pacing the auction to the best outcome for you, as opposed to getting into some emotionally charged outcome where you'll ultimately pay too much.
That's right, Ben. So there's experience, and then there's the emotion of doing it yourself. The next thing that a buyer's agent can help with on that experience is knowing the markets as a theory versus I've actually been in the suburb and pounded the pavement. Because if you are buying in a market, let's say you live in a market that's a really great investment grade suburb, great. But what if you don't? Then you have to look online and see a whole bunch of resources, and there's some really wonderful resources to help you get an understanding of the suburb. But nothing actually beats actually pounding the pavement, being in the suburbs, getting a feel for the suburbs, looking for the little things that you won't pick up. You see the brands of the prams that people are pushing to give you an early indication of a sign that may be indicating that a suburb is gentrifying. You might also walk into the suburb and see entry-level European cars that also suggest that there's an early sign for gentrification. You're walking around and you're seeing lots of trades and you're seeing extensions being put on, and you're starting to just get a feel for what's going on in the suburb. You get a feel for the street. You get a feel for which part of the street is the A's and the B's. So I think there's something to be said for the experience that comes from being in these markets regularly and understanding the nuances of pockets within the suburbs as well. So I think when you're buying a property on average once every 7 years, on average, but clearly that's also accounting for some who don't do it every 20 and some who do it more regularly. That is wonderful intel that you get that a buyer's agent can share.
Yeah, Bryce, I'm looking for the variety of stock. Like, there's different types of established houses. There might be contemporary, there might be Federation, Edwardian, clinkers, Hawthorn brick, all the different types of Cal bungalows, post-war, weatherboards, you name them. So when I'm going through more of those more established areas, I'm looking for, does this suburb have a consistency of stock, or is there variety of that? I'm also looking for established benchmarks. So what is the most expensive grouping of properties in that top quartile? Where am I buying? What does the land elements of that look like? The other things that's also big for me is the elevations. Do I have elevations? What's the natural light that's coming into the street? Those types of things as well. So there is a lot to take away when you are trying to get a sense of the suburb, its livability, its demographics, and then ultimately the variety of housing stock. Some suburbs have very little variety. They were very contemporary built and only had 12 or 15 sort of designs in which you could pick from. In other cases, we're seeing suburbs that are 40, 50 years old, where people are knocking down some of those older homes and now building more modern contemporary homes or duplexes and all of that. So that's coming back to what you're saying about the spend that's going on in there, because ultimately it's the land value that's going to appreciate, unless there's an emotive element in terms of driving me in there to pay a premium for that location in which I want to live in.
Absolutely, Ben. It's what it takes to obviously own a property. Some, a buyer's agent's bought lots of the old period homes, Ben. We know where the maintenance is. We know where the, the tired old ladies and gents of the bygone era, they are wonderfully in demand, but they also can be maintenance rich. So you get to know that, well, okay, based on your risk profile, I wouldn't recommend you get one of those, because they quite often need some form of upgrade, whether it's 3, 5, 10 years down the track, and you've got to be able to stomach that, because the floors might be done, or the stumps need to be redoing, or there might be some hidden cancer in the building of some sort that, something that's been around for 100 years. You need to be prepared and ready for that. So I guess that comes from experience, and I guess that's what the buyer's agent can provide.
Yep.
They also have a process that they go through. So it's a methodical process. You talked about it a few weeks back around property planning. It's sequencing. It's also sequencing within the property buying transaction. What do I need to do in what order? And I always think of it like the air traffic controller. There's 6 or 7 planes in the air they got to land. They got to work out which order they need to land those planes so they all come in safely. It's the same thing with the process for buying. What do you have to do before you have to do the next step, before you have to do the next step? So experience helps a well-worn path be established by the buyer's agent so they can guide their client on the journey to make it stress-free. And that's really important. So a couple of things to think about then. Also, Ben, the deep network is established through experience. So if you think about all of the services that you need to tap into when you're buying, so a buyer's agent helps them establish a location, they help them identify a property, and they help them facilitate the exchange from the vendor to the new owner. But there's a whole bunch of other relationships that need to happen, building and pest, for example, conveyances. And it's the strength of these relationships, but also the coverage. Because if you're wanting to buy interstate, Ben, as a borderless investor, and all of a sudden you go, I don't know any conveyancers in Queensland, I don't know any building inspectors in Queensland, what am I going to do? So that network is really, really extensive. The more experience that you get, and the better you are at your craft as a buyer's agent.
Yeah, and obviously the property manager relationship in that area, if we dig a little deeper or dive into that one, they'll give you a sense of the type of tenancy market that is going to be available in this area, and the nuances around those types of tenants and what best serves for those types of things as well. And they're painting a picture in terms of once, and obviously we're wearing our investors hats at the moment, not owner occupier here, but we're basically trying to identify those people who are going to take care of the property, who are going to be house proud around that and look after your asset, but also get quite enjoyment out of that asset whilst they're also living there. So that is about those relationships that they are building, because in theory, a buyer's agent is not going to come into one market and just buy one property and move on. There's the odd owner-occupier brief, which that can happen. But if you're going into a marketplace, usually based on your fundamentals of analysis and your demand and supply and all the research you've done, you're probably going to go in there as a business and buy, in our case, we might buy up to 50 properties in that particular location, or in that, SA3 level, or that group of suburbs in that location. And so it really is important that you you do have that, you set those networks up, build those relationships. And that also includes the selling agents in the area.
Very good. So the other thing that that experience brings is helping avoid common mistakes, Ben. So none more common than the buyer who goes up to the agent and pretty much gives away some key intel on how to negotiate at the end because you haven't got there. Whereas a buyer's agent knows what questions to ask, how much to reveal, and ultimately just by the fact that they are an experienced buyer's agent, the real estate agent's going to know that they're not going to. Once they cross the white line in the negotiation stakes, it's not as if they're going to be able to take the money out of them that doesn't represent fair value and dropping for position and looking for strategic advantages in the negotiation. They get that. So it's just being able to avoid common mistakes that just by doing this regularly day in, day out, the buyer who isn't doing it regularly can't compete with that.
Oh, Bryce, I've got a great story in this spot. This is my favorite dumb story about myself, right? Yeah. So here I am, I'm 20, I think I was 21, 22 when I bought my first property, house across the road from mum and dad. It's going to auction. And so I go to one of the open for inspections, go by myself because obviously I want to, act and feel confident that I know what I'm doing. And so I walk through the property, I talk to the agent. I feel like I've got some information. I'm starting to line my ducks up, get my lending right, get my first home buyer's grant sort of information there. So I'm all good to go for the auction day. And I get to the auction. I think I've told this story before on the pod, but for those people who haven't done a full lap, here's what plays out. We're at the auction, 119,000, 119,500, 120,000. I put my first bid in. I come in as a new bidder, and that's it. No one else bids, and I buy the house for $120,000. Right? My first property, my first auction, and I'm feeling really good about myself. And so I go inside, sign the paperwork, and he goes, I was really worried about you. In terms of, I didn't think, where were you going to bid? Because I knew what you were going to. And I said, how did you know what I was going to? Well, the first question I asked you when I asked you who you were and got your details was, what do you think it's worth? And you told me it was worth 120 grand. So here I am as a naive person, not playing my cards close to my chest, telling the selling agent what I was prepared to, what it was worth. I didn't realise he's made what it's worth is actually what I'm going to pay for it. Yeah. But I've given that full disclosure away. So that's a perfect example of someone who comes in making very simple mistakes because I didn't know what I was doing, right? And that's a good test case for others in terms of the information that they share to the selling agent. So there you go.
There you go. Well, it's kind of like the post-mortem that everyone has at some point. They have a robust discussion with someone or whatever, and then they do that reflection. They go, "Oh, I should have said this, and I should have."
Yes.
Oh, if I had my time again, that actually happens in real estate, Ben. Because but the thing is, the problem is in that scenario we just talked about. It's like, oh, if I had that barbecue over again, I'd do the costs are pretty well. In some cases, they're pretty low. It's just a lost opportunity to get your point across, right? Whereas in real estate, if you could have picked that property up for 115, Ben, and he knew you were going to 120, that's a $5,000 experience that it's cost you. That in post-mortem, I wouldn't have done. Well, you can't get the money back, right? So that's just but one simple example, but of how it works. So common mistakes is really important. So here's how you choose one. Are they an audit taker or an advisor? That's what you've got to work out. 2, do they have a team around them and some systems that support that? Or are they typically a one-man show and doing both what's called the dollar productive work, Ben, which is getting the deals done and having the relationship with the agents, and the non-dollar productive work, which is all the stuff that supports that isn't necessarily getting the big rocks in the jar. So that's important. And then we've talked about track record. Are they experienced and are they independent? So under the benefit to the purchaser, there's a few things there that we've shared where that will act in the favour of the person who uses a buyer's agent.
Yeah, I think you should be asking those questions, right? Like if you're going to engage a professional to do some work, what do they bring to the table? Exactly you put in place. So how many properties have you bought before and how have they gone? And why are you buying in this area and what supporting evidence do you have for that? And what's the paperwork in which is going to show me your abilities and your experience and your skill sets? Can I speak to someone that you've worked with in the past about their experiences? I mean, it's an investment that you're making in this buyer's agent. So these types of questions will be helpful in terms of working out. You're picking a professional service person, whether, if we flip the conversation around the other way and it's the selling agent, you're not going to just choose the very first one that you potentially interview. You want to try and test the waters on that. So same sort of thing for a buyer's agent in terms of making sure that you're asking the right types of questions. And if they've got a track record and they come with strong recommendations and a proven outcomes for customers, then you're on the right footing.
Very good. So there you go. Number one benefit, folks, is that experience. And we've just touched the surface on where that comes to the fore. Second thing is the negotiation. Now, negotiation is a skill that requires repetition to hone, Ben. It requires you to be thinking about common objections. It be requiring you to think strategically. And it also means that you need to have a viable plan B to put yourself in the strongest position. It is an art and a science for that.
It is.
And for you to work with the buyer's agent, they're negotiating a lot, right? So they know how to negotiate. Like a real estate agent puts time into learning the craft of negotiation, a buyer's agent also learns the craft of negotiating. But also part of that too, Ben, comes from having an understanding of comps, right? So we've said this last week, the comp analysis is actually quite difficult to do. For you to be able to compare apples with apples and adjust for the bruises, right? So being able to get comprehensive comparables done for us, who does it regularly as a professional, takes hours. It does. It takes hours. So, and the nuances that come from being able to do that comparable analysis, but being able to do good comp analysis puts you in a superior position of strength when it comes to negotiation, right? Because part of that is knowing your numbers, knowing where the number is, knowing where value's at, knowing where stuff is sold recently, knowing where stuff is sold recently that's not on the public record, so that you get a sense, and which isn't got anything to do with price guides. So first of all, you can jockey for your position just purely on knowing the value before you get into knowing the vendor, understanding what their motivations are, understanding is price the only thing that's important to them? Is it a longer settlement? Is it early release of deposit? Is it a special condition that is something that's important to them? So having a rock solid base of understanding where the value add is just the beginning, right? Because then there's the trying to work with the agent, asking the right questions, because the agent is the gatekeeper of information for the vendor if they're doing their job well. So asking them why they're selling is a question that is laughable, right? You've got to come up with more creative ways of saying, why are they selling? Or find out what's important to the vendor to get an idea of why they're selling. Is it divorce? Is it debt? Is there a set of circumstances that you can craft your offer in the most appealing way to the other side? Some cases, Ben, we have been up against other people where our offer was lower, but we got it because the person who was putting in the competing offer, the vendor didn't like them or didn't like the plans that they had for the property. So there's some important stuff that needs to go on.
There's a huge amount to unpack here. We could spend hours talking about this. How would I summarize some of this stuff? First of all, you've got to acknowledge that you don't come into the transaction with perfect knowledge, right? And in a lot of respects, if you're not doing this as a profession, your level of knowledge is inferior to the level of knowledge of a professional, because the professional would usually have access to richer data, more experience of recent sales, or relationships with agents. So there's no doubt that there is a disadvantage if you're doing this individually compared to using a professional, if that professional is experienced and good at what they're doing. So just acknowledge that there's no such thing as perfect knowledge, because you aren't going to get every bit of great information from the selling agent. The selling agent's job is not to disclose everything to you, but the great negotiation skill of a great buyer's agent is they will get that information, or as much of that information as they can possibly get down on, and they know the craft of the selling agent. So when there is a story that's evolving, I've heard this story before, and so the logical outcome of this is that they are a forced seller, and so that they do need to sell, even though they haven't fully disclosed it to me. I've got enough experience, so you're now bringing experience and negotiation together to be able to form that view. And so it's only through that repetition and that understanding that you can start to bring that. So That is an advantage of getting the most available knowledge available to you. Again, you will never have perfect knowledge, but you will be able to make informed decisions. And that's where a buyer's agent, I think, has an advantage because they are able to bring that to the table.
They have an advantage, Ben, because they're dealing with agents. So quite often when we're buying a property today, we might have bought 3 off them in the last 90 days or 20 off them over the last 12 months, right? So we get to understand the nuances of the personality, how they like to present their offers, the rules of the game.
Correct.
Because the rules of the transaction are different depending on the offer. You might have an agent who just wants to get deals done and get their commission. You might have someone who's been in the game for a long time. Their reputation is really important. They do whatever it takes to milk every last cent out of, and then something in every part of the spectrum in between. So you have to know how to negotiate underquoting and how to navigate that. You have to negotiate how agents fish for offers and if they're bluffing. You need to understand what gazumping is. It happens massively in New South Wales.
Yeah.
Where the deal's not done until it's done. You've got this exchange. So there's shopping around, and someone might use your offer to try and get the fear of missing out from another buyer to get them up through scarcity and urgency based on your offer. You need to understand these mental triggers that are going into play. So agents have preferences, Ben. They love relationships. They prefer to deal with someone who they know and trust rather than an unknown buyer. Now, in a hot market, that kind of goes out the window, Ben, because they just know that press hard 4 copies. Let's just fly. Yeah. But in equilibrium markets and markets where I don't think the market's turned, Ben, but I understand the market sentiment has turned, and they're two different things, right? So in a market sentiment turn, they have a preference to deal with professionals because they know they're professional, they're going to get it done. They know that they also are based on an outcome. So dealing with agents is something that you get the experience of someone who knows how to negotiate.
Yeah, and if I can build further on that, Bryce. Great buyers agents have very good EQ, emotional intelligence, because the spectrum of selling agents out there is quite broad, from huge ego, big status, big chest beating, both male and female, right down to genuine, caring selling agents who believe in the purpose of what they're doing to help people transition from property to property. Now, inside that spectrum, a buyer's agent needs to develop a relationship with that selling agent. And so the worst type of buyer's agent, from my point of view, is someone who also goes in with a big ego. I think the best buyer's agents are the ones who can model the behavior when they need to of that selling agent and get onto their level and get an understanding with them. Because if it's an adversarial, thank you, Bryce, got that, adversarial negotiation, it's usually not going to land in your favor. So that's where it's an art form as part of the negotiation to be able to, because again, you're going to be managing some big egos on the selling side, and also managing the expectation of your buyer, and obviously, trying to get an understanding of the nuances of the seller in terms of what the vendor is up to. So there is a real craft associated with that. And so don't mistake confidence of a buyer's agents from ego. That's the other thing. Like, we've got some amazing buyer's agents in our team, so I can confidently say that they're not big on ego, but they're incredibly competent and have an incredible amount of confidence in their skill set and their experience in terms of being able to do that. But they don't gallivanting around beating their chest that they've bought over 1,000 properties for clients or anything like that. They're just getting on with the work, and they know that each transaction is unique and is going to be handled in a different way. So that's what you want to look for in your buyer's agent, someone who is relatable, who can walk the walk and talk the talk, and who's quietly confident because they have the experience and knowledge as part of that.
Smart is dumb and dumb is smart, Ben. It's being able to disarm the agent. Some of our buyer's agents build relationships with the agents over social media, connecting in, know what football team they follow, know what food they like. They're just building relationship to know that they become an asset, because make no mistake, a buyer's agent's one of their biggest asset is their agent relationships. They nurture them, they build on them, They do whatever it takes to build those relationships. Now, do not mistake that for them being a pushover when it comes to negotiation. But what it does mean is it gets them a seat at the table, gives them a look at advanced listings, it gives them a look at off markets, it gives them all of the favour that comes to allow them to step up to the white line. But as soon as they step up to the white line, it's game on, right? They're doing whatever it takes to duke it out for their client. But agent relationships is unbelievably critical, Ben. You mentioned it before. I've seen plenty of buyers agents be just real tossers in negotiation, particularly at auctions. They do a bunch of peacocking. They've got this delusional sense that crowd will be impressed and they'll be flooded with offers at the end of the auction for, can I have your business card? It is just, I've never seen it. I've never seen a buyer's agent who tries to be a knob at an auction succeed in that strategy because it puts the agent off.
Correct.
And when I see it, Ben, I think, and early days when we were establishing the buyer's agent industry, because I've been doing this for a long time, Ben, they weren't doing us any favours at all.
There's a lot of maturity that's being formed in the buyer's agent industry, and that's great to see because there's certainly a huge amount of value that they bring to the table.
Now, buyer's agents can bid at auctions too in a professionally aggressive way. So we've had many clients come up to us, Ben, they've given us written feedback that says, I'd hate to come up against you guys after seeing you in action. There is a whole bunch of psychology and strategy and aggression, professional aggression that are employed at auctions you see it by a number of buyer's agents, but there is strategy, 100% strategy involved in that. And most people would rather be in the casket than deliver the eulogy, Ben. So it is a public speaking environment. It is off-putting for a lot of people. I promise you, every auction that I bid at, I still have the heartbeat ticking along. It is addictive. It's a really good adrenaline, but uncontrolled adrenaline that can send you going off derailed very quickly. Last thing I want to say on negotiation, Ben, because you're right, we could do weeks and weeks and weeks on negotiation, is just to give some examples of how we've used price reductions as part of our negotiating strategy. So one of our recent purchases, the team were able to negotiate $19,000 off to fix a retaining wall and garage ceiling. Now, we knew about the retaining wall and the ceiling, but we gave them an offer just to get it under contract and then later negotiate it off so that we could get it done, right? So there's a bit in that one, because if you've got multiple offers all coming, part of the job is just to get in the game, get your hat in the ring and secure it. And then what happens is once you secure it, everyone stands down, they walk away and they disperse, right? You've got all this concentrated energy on the agent and then they disperse, right? And then once they've dispersed, if we can see an opportunity there, we can negotiate. Another one is we negotiated $7,000 off for small items, which would cost no more than $3,000 max to fix, right? So, and we were able to get that arbitrage on the price, get it fixed, move on. And then a third one, we negotiated $3,000 off for a rotted beam under a carport that the building inspector said would be super easy to fix. So less than $3,000, secured it, got the property negotiated. So that ties back into the experience we were talking about before, Ben. Knowing what it takes to put yourself in the driver's seat in pole position is a combination of a whole bunch of things, including what we just described then.
Yeah, and we've done other auction and negotiation sessions. So we'll get the team together to look in the show notes, and we'll make sure we put the links to the different episodes that we've done when we've gone a little bit deeper on that, because again, we could spend a lot more time on that. So that will fast track you to those episodes where we've talked a little bit more about negotiation and auctions.
Yeah, good one, Ben. Hey, the next benefit. So we talked about one benefit being experience, the second benefit being the negotiation. The third one is emotional guidance. You talked on it before about the EQ, but this is a very underrated part of the process, right? That emotional guidance that comes from effectively having what's a collaboration partner. Because if someone's out in the field and they're looking at a house, who do they talk to? Their partner who has exactly the same sort of experience and run rate of what they've got, or do they talk to a trusted friend or well-meaning family member? So being able to have that support so you can apply logic and process with calculated decisions, not just emotion. Let me promise you, if you can have someone take care of all the process and have to think of nothing, that equals a stress-free experience for you. And not all cost is measured in price. being able to remove some of that anxiety and stress is something that you can't put a price tag on, but it's very, very important.
Ross, there is risk in investing. Let's make it very, very clear to everybody that no matter what you plan for, some things do come up that carry risk, and they could affect the long-term, short-term, whatever performance of that. So we want to always make sure we start by being as informed as we can be. But as part of, we were talking about the emotional intelligence of dealing with the other parties. When we're dealing with our party, so when someone's engaged us to be able to be an actor on their behalf as the buyer's agent, we've got to do a couple of essential and important things. We need to answer all of their questions as openly and as honestly as we possibly can. Mm-hmm. Right? We also want to make sure that the level of trust between the client and ourselves is one of high engagement and high trust. If we get that, then usually there's a good outcome that's coming from that. Because as you rightly point out, Bryce, there is logic in the process that we're taking. We are trying to take the emotion out of it, but we don't lose sight of the fact that for some people, this is the very first time they've done this. And there is emotion attached to that. So our job is to stay calm, remain professional, answer any questions that are on the table, and put our best foot forward based on the research that we've done, the experience that we bring to the table to be able to provide a fulfilling outcome.
And provide that regular communication. This is a large decision, as you said. So here's some of the key milestones. Here's some of the points that you might have some anxiety. I am your collaboration partner. So we'll provide you with that moral, emotional support through the process, which will overcome the worry. But it also means that logic and process become part of it rather than emotion. That's super important. So there's a process before you buy. There's a process after you buy. So having a confident and agile team and being a part of that as a collaboration is really, really important. So emotional guidance is a huge benefit to the purchaser. The next one is time saving. Now, fast is better than free, Ben. So if you just ask Amazon, just ask Uber, just ask Netflix, right? Fast is better than free, right? So being able to save time is incredible. You can leverage your time. It is actually quite easy to underestimate how time consuming the season is when you go to purchase. It's like, particularly when you're doing it on your own, it's like 4 weekends goes in a blink and you may not have even done anything. You're trying to get your head around. You're working at the same time. You've got family commitments. You've got to pick up the kids. You've got whatever your hobby commitments are, whatever your circumstances are. And then you're trying to find this big transaction that goes into it. So being able to leverage your time through using a buyer's agent is really, really important, because then you only need to have the input into things that are mission critical for you. Signing a contract's mission critical for you. Having a conversation about making a decision to go ahead is critical for you. But all of the other stuff means that you get to get some form of normality into your world during this really busy season, but without having to take on all the nuances and the tactics, so you can stay strategic and lead the tactics at the BA level.
A lot of people underestimate the power of momentum. So again, if I'm thinking about trying to do this myself, 2 to 3 weeks in of looking and inspecting to get a sense of the market that I'm looking to buy in, a lot of evening work, a lot of properties that I'm saying, no, yes, add to the watch list, no, yes. And then I've got momentum coming in. And then the third weekend, we've got a wedding on the Saturday. We've got a 21st on the Saturday. All of that momentum stops. Right. And then I'm 1 week out, the next weekend we're going away. So this is a big delay. It's a game delay, right? Where it's almost like the card comes up, you've got 10 minutes in the sin bin and you can't come back out to play. Momentum is critical. And so you shouldn't lose momentum when you've got a professional who's basically spending 60 hours a week in the game and carrying that momentum forward. So, when you're talking about, fast is better than free, that to me is a big game changer for those people who have sort of said, we started looking about 6 or 8 months ago, but then life got in the way and now we're coming back to it, or we don't. So losing that momentum could cause you to basically be out of the game when you should have probably secured a property and moved on.
And there's been times where the buyer's agents team is putting together, like they're at a restaurant, they have to go out to the car.
Yes.
They have to put something together at 7:00 on a Saturday night, just because it doesn't wait for you to get home from dinner and then go to sleep, wake up on the Sunday. It's gone. So being able to act quickly is something that is incredibly helpful. And that time saving is, I think it's priceless, right? But the BA see lots of properties. So we developed a tool in our business where we call scraping, where we can bring in the listing into our database, and then we can perform a whole bunch of analysis on it, a whole big checklist that we go through, right? On what makes for investment grade property. Now we're doing scores and scores of those every week, right? So each buyer's agent seeing hundreds of properties. They are actually doing due diligence on scores of properties. And then because we've got a team of collaboration, they all get to see that. So we're actually amplifying the amount of properties that we get to see, so that allows you to be discerning very quickly on what makes for a good one and which one isn't, right? So that is an incredible, that's a leveraged time saving that you're able to provide as a buyer's agent if you've got access to being able to see that in a team environment across a whole bunch of properties. There is just no way that you can compete on the volume.
And magnify that, Bryce, by the fact that, I mean, I know we're talking about our business because that's our experience, but you'd be thinking about any buyer's agency business that you're looking at or whatever. But when you've got a dozen or half a dozen buyer's agents in your team, uncovering those off markets or pre-markets is also amplified.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like if you're a single buyer's agent who's, got a patch and you're sort of working really hard to turn stones over, you just don't have the ability to turn as many stones over as the bigger organisations do. And that is, unfortunately, the benefit of scale. That's the benefit of basically having a team of people who are able to do that. So when we're talking about, as you say, scraping or ingesting those properties into our research platform, we're doing hundreds and hundreds of those every week. And we've got that scale of being able to share that across our list of clients that we're currently working through. And that's why we're able to buy the number of properties that we buy each month.
So there's that curation. So curation is a big thing. I identify myself as a curation person, Ben. I like to curate other people's ideas and bring them together to create a framework so that I can understand it first and then obviously share it here. So there's a bunch of curation, often competing and conflicting information. So being able to curate that and synthesize it out in a way that sort of makes sense as to why this one is the right one to go. Because you might find something that's in the same suburb that has a reason to go yes on it and no to go on the one around the corner, and being able to curate and bring that together as to why that is the case is really, really important. I'll quickly run off a few more things here, Ben. Organising the specialists afterwards. So getting a property manager, interviewing those property managers, knowing what questions to ask, understanding the business model to determine the service levels after sign up, because a lot of the property managers have a great sign up process, but after sign up service levels,
post care,
the post care, we have these wonderful relationships with property managers, and we're in constant dialogue with them about the rental market and the conditions and what the tenants are saying, and is there any adjustment that needs to be made, and what do we need to do, and we pass it through to the buyer's agent. So that's an enormous amount of time being saved, and also there's a final inspection that needs to be done in most cities. Pre-settlement inspection is standard. In Adelaide, for example, it's not. So you've got to negotiate that in. So that comes back to experience, but communicating with that agent, troubleshooting. So the idea of, if we can make the process as a buyer's agent seamless from end to end, thinking about everything, proactively thinking about everything, so that the person only has to have key input at certain milestones. That is well and truly the goal here. So there's definitely a time saving. So if we go to the benefits, there's experience, there's negotiation, there's that emotional guidance, there's time saving. Then the last big sort of overarching part to this framework, Ben, is saving money, right? Saving a lot of money. Now, what I want to lead this off by saying, no buyer's agent ever says they're going to negotiate our fee off the price, right? Because in some cases, that is a work of fiction, right? Because in some circumstances, paying market, or in certain cases paying a little bit over the market price just to secure it for the long term happens. But where I think there's 4 ways that you'll pay, I've said this before in another podcast, wrong asset, you're paying too much, you procrastinate, or you'll need professional advice. So we might dive into a couple of those, Ben. But starting, first of all, the way we'll save you money is by making sure you don't buy the wrong asset.
Really simple. There's some fundamental analysis that we try and do on the short term, and there's obviously longer macroeconomic indicators that we're looking for in the locations that we're buying in that will ensure the future economic prosperity and growth domestic product or state production that we're looking for when we come down into the more nuanced areas. So they're the main things. And obviously, we've said on this podcast for a long time, in simple terms, the first thing we always say is historically old properties. We're trying to get them at value. They've had proven resales. We're not paying a profitable result from a new build. So they're being provenly tested in the market. And ultimately, we're buying that long-term land appreciation or livability of that area and the economic throughput of that area. So just remember that property is ultimately the result of economic development in a location over a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100-year period. And we're trying to get on the shoestrings of that and also look at those opportunities in those markets and find those assets that will have quiet enjoyment for the tenants that are in there, but owner-occupier appeal as part of that. I mean, this is what we've been banging on about for 400 plus episodes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in there, but I thought I'd just summarize it that way.
Yeah. Asset selection, I think, buying the wrong asset, 1% off over a compounded period of time makes a big difference. So that's where I think we'll save money, because if you do the net position of having someone help you versus doing it yourself, and what that looks like after the end of the journey is huge. We won't go too much into that, other than to say we think that a buyer's agent who is experienced, independent, and knows what they're doing should be able to help you with that. Secondly, paying too much. Look, we've touched on that in negotiation, right? But that's where they will help you save money, to make sure that you don't pay too much. That doesn't mean they will negotiate their fee out of the price. Some cases, yes. But beware any buyer's agent who says they guarantee they'll do that, because in reality, that's not possible that they can guarantee they'll do that.
No.
Whilst keeping your best interest at heart. You'd want that to be the case some of the time, but you can't guarantee it. So it's wrong asset. And then procrastination, I think, is the big one that I want to labour on here, Ben. Because we're saying, why would you use a buyer's agent in this market? Because procrastination is, without a doubt, more expensive than paying too much, more expensive than, probably touch and go wrong asset versus procrastination, depending on how long you procrastinate. But it is an enormous cost if you get it wrong. So if the game is to play a long game, if the game is to get the best quality asset you can possibly get, and the market sentiment, not the market sentiment is providing you with an opportunity here, I think that this is where some of the biggest value can come in at this point in time in the market for using a buyer's agent is around procrastination, Ben.
Simply the biggest wealth killer known, Ross, is procrastination. Not taking action when you're in a position to take action and if you think about, if you think you can time the market and you think you're a genius at doing that, and we've touched on a little bit last week's episode where we were sort of saying it doesn't take much for a market to turn, then the fact that if you're even buying in a falling market, which I've done personally, only to see the benefits a decade or two later, it's not so relevant. And I think that, again, it's only human nature to feel when you've got uncertainty that you are a little bit more apprehensive. Completely understandable. But what we are saying here is that fortune does favour the brave for those people who do take this action and who think longer term. Like ultimately, in a lot of cases, property prices will revert back to their long-term regressional mean, and that's cool, right? And if you're going to get a 6 or a 7% return over the long period of time, that's financially transformational for you and your household. So never lose sight of that. Sure, we always, it's only human instinct to want to get a bargain, but the point being here is that we've played this game long enough to know, and we've helped thousands and thousands of customers, that just executing on the plan will actually get you into a far better financial position over the longer term than thinking that you've got the genius to be able to time the market. Because anyone who says that they can do that is full of crap. That doesn't mean that you don't still use some of the fundamental analysis where, as Bryce was saying before, the sentiment in the market's off, but we are absolutely still using fundamental analysis around demand and supply and looking at markets that are actually still in pretty good shape or are in excellent shape come the landing that we'll have over the next sort of 3 to 6 months to basically rebound in a solid way, because they're the markets that do present these absolute beautiful gems from time to time when other people are fearful.
Well said, Ben. Now, it's all right for you and me, Ben. We've been doing this for 20 years. It's pretty easy for us to take the emotion out and buy and play the long term. So quite often you hear that. So I recently caught up with one of our previous Winter Series guests, Tui Lepkami. Hopefully I got that surname right. Had a little conversation because Tui hasn't been investing as long as you and I have, and has recently purchased in the current environment. So let's cut to the interview that I had recently with Tui just to get his insights into the buyer's agent's process. Welcome back to the Property Couch, Tui.
Thanks, Bryce. Thanks for having me back.
We are putting together an episode regarding using buyer's agents, and I know you've recently used one. So it serves two purposes here for us to do a little bit of a follow-up on your story, but also to get your insight. So tell me, why did you consider using a buyer's agent, Tui?
One of the key reasons was, we go back to my story of like having a property already that we bought and lived in for a while, and then we used that as a first investment property. The biggest question for myself was, how were we going to buy the second investment property? Because I wanted to build our portfolio. So I wasn't quite sure the criteria of doing that and where I could do that. So I started doing a bit of research, and as I dug deeper and when I found you guys, I found that there was so much variabilities that you have to get right. Vacancy rates, the location score, and all these other metrics that I just didn't have the time or energy really to try and learn that stuff. Then I heard through the podcast and through other podcasts around utilizing a buyer's agents who do this for a living. So for me, that really felt like a shortcut and outsourcing the function, but it felt like it would remove the stress and the headache. Now, when I started looking up utilizing buyer's agents, the cost for me I felt like it was a bit of a barrier to entry because it is a big investment.
It is.
But then when you play it off the back of the longer term piece of actually getting the right property versus doing it yourself and potentially having a high risk of not getting the right property, then if a buyer's agent can give you, I think it was like 1% better than what you can do, then over the course of 15 to 20 years, that 1% could really equate to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the investment you put in at the front to utilize a buyer's agent, that's a drop in the ocean over the life of the property that you actually get. So to reduce the risk of not getting quality property versus getting a quality property, the weight of what you get at the end it was no brainer.
It becomes a net cost thing, doesn't it? You got to think about, because people buy a house to live in and they don't have to think about anything really other than the practicalities of why they want to buy a house. It's a roof over their head first. And then there's a bunch of emotional practicalities, whether it's mum and dad are down the street or whether it's close to the school or it's near friends. So that's quite easy for people to solve that because it's logical and it's personal. But then being able to work out, well, okay, not every property is investment grade, and I've got to sift through suburbs and property types and then have some confidence around that. And one of the things is value is defined as benefit over cost, right? But if we expand that a little bit more, if you think about above the line, the benefit is you want to achieve your dream outcome, and then you've got your perceived likelihood of achievement, right? So that's one. But at the bottom, the cost can be measured in time, delay, and effort and sacrifice. And it's those two things that I want to talk about, because time delay is something that I think that buyer's agents are able to help with, because there's procrastination involved. There's being able to get into the market. You said before that buyer's agents talk to a lot of agents. They look through a lot of properties. That actually helps minimize that time delay. And then the other part of the equation is the effort and sacrifice. And, if you're not doing this all the time and you're not looking at properties and you're not being able to filter through that, it can actually ramp your effort and sacrifice up. So Can you talk to those 2 points, Twee, around time delay and effort and sacrifice? And those are some of the 2 keys that I reckon the buyer's agent really helps with.
Yeah, and that's definitely the case. I mean, I started dabbling and having a look at suburbs and that sort of stuff. But the other thing that the buyer's agents opened me up to was not just looking in my backyard, right? You've got this concept of open market, so borderless investing, as you say. And for me to try and do that for every single suburb, just not feasible. Absolutely not feasible. And I would be only restricted to my demographic, right? But from that time perspective, I did start looking, especially when the buyer's agent that we used, they gave us this beautiful rundown of the suburbs that we were going to look at within a city and had all these metrics and details in there. I started doing my own search for, on realestate.com. And even then it was like, there's so much there that I got overwhelmed, and it was to the point where it just stops you from going to the next step. And that was just a litmus test of how much work the buyer's agents actually do.
Yeah.
Because they have a network or a team of people that they utilize. So they've got networks or contacts with building and pest teams and real estate agents and conveyancers and solicitors and, property managers and mortgage brokers. So all these connections that if I tried to make, I wouldn't even have time to weed out or find quality ones, right? And from that timing perspective, it's just shortcuts the step of actually getting your property, right? So that was a key thing for me. And going through the process with my buyer's agent, I mean, she was a gun, step by step, communicating to me like what was next. I remember we went for one property. It was an auction, and I was quite nervous going into it. But what she did for me was before the auction, just calmly said, okay, these are our strategies. These are the key points and numbers we're going to hit. This is what we'll do here. And then all you need to do is be on the phone. And we planned it beforehand so that, your emotions don't play a part and you go that extra 10,000 K or whatever. So we had our limit. We hit that limit and we just had to cut the ties on that because that property actually fell through because it went for way more than what we thought it was going to do. But that was okay. We cut that. Call it a loss, but that's part of business, right? So,
well, that's a good point. You say it's part of business, but you'd filtered a heap of properties to get to that one,
definitely.
And then it's a cost of business. I think that's something we need to think about here too, because if you're not expert at filtering, you can burn a lot of cash, on properties that you're not 100% sure on. So sure, you missed it, but you had a decent swing, and it wasn't you weren't wasting heaps and heaps of building and pests on properties that you weren't really in the game for previously as well.
Yeah, and where we bought, is it okay if I say where?
Yeah, tell us the story. Tell us how you went.
So where we bought was we're in Adelaide, and Adelaide's actually at the moment just a hot market. I mean, the vacancy rates there are below 1%, and we think about the inflation that's coming in now, but people are still wanting to buy, right? So we've just hit this peak. Hopefully it drops off, but I don't know. Doesn't matter for now because what we had next was, I think it was a couple of weeks later, our buyer's agents came back and she sort of sussed out 2 properties that we could go for. Really great locations again. Went in and did the videos and turned on the taps and did all these other checks. We did the building and pest for one of them, but there was an auction the first one was probably within 5 days, I think it was. So, and the other one was in like a week's time. She went through both of those, told us what they were, showed us their locations and gave us all the dimensions of the place. And the question was, which one do you want to go for? And my discussion with her was, let's just go for both because they're quality properties. If we miss one, we go for the other. So that was the plan going in. We had a set number we needed to play with. So for the first one, before the actual auction day, there was a bit of negotiations that our buyer's agent did with the real estate agent and the vendors. And Bryce, I'll tell you now, that was a masterclass in just that microcosm of condensed negotiation techniques. I wouldn't have been able to do it. Would have been no way. There was one point where we put in our bid, and the real estate agent spoke to the vendor and came back and said, "Oh, can you actually make it 20K more?" And we had hit our limits. So this is where our buyer's agent was like, "No, we've got the number. We've had a building and pest inspection actually, and there's a couple of things that we need to do to fix up this property. And also, if we miss this one, we've actually got another place that we're going to go for, which has a larger land component." what she'd also found out was actually sort of insights that you don't get as an individual. She got wind that actually the vendors had actually moved out already and they had a bridging loan in between. So what our buyer's agent did there was, okay, we've got our finances sorted. So what we can do, or what we can offer here, is a shorter settlement time. So rather than 60 to 90 days, we did it within 30 days. And we got that. And that was the sweetener that got them over the line, and we got it for the price that we wanted straight off the bat. This happened in a window of 15 to 20 minutes. And when our buyer's agents called us, I was on the phone with Jen as well, so I put our buyer's agent on the speakerphone, and it was sort of like I was dumbstruck, because it was like, okay, now you've got a house now.
Just like that.
And it only just like that. And it was mind blowing, because it was only after that. And I thought, Jen, we've just bought a house.
Yes.
And it sort of started to trigger over the next sort of couple of days. It was like, we've got a house. Yes, we've got a house. And the funny thing is, it was sight unseen by us. But we had the trust and the faith that our buyer's agent would give us that quality property. And the thing is that it is definitely quality property, because we also now established through the buyer's agent network a property manager, and she's even said that it is a quality property and it'll rent really quickly.
Let's lean into that sight unseen, right? So how did you overcome that, right? So you didn't actually see the property, the buyer's agent did. But did you get some footage, photos?
Yeah, we did. Definitely. Our buyer's agent did the walkthrough of every single room and turned the taps on, and explained what was incorporated and what was not incorporated, and just a plethora of detail that I wouldn't have even thought to do if I walked through the place. The funny thing is, I was talking to my uncle, who's a restaurant owner, and I was telling him the experience of like actually buying this property. He goes, "So you bought this and you didn't even see it?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, how could you do that?" And I said, "It's a mind shift, a mentality shift, but also trusting the team that you've got in place to help you out."
I wouldn't recommend you do that lightly, folks. So here's a couple of things, right? If you're going to buy it as borderless and sight unseen, you need to have some incredible trust and faith in your team, and you need to make sure that you are dealing with someone who's actually working with your best interest in mind. Because there's lots of people who bought sight unseen in the past, and the agenda of the person helping them is not in alignment with the agenda of the person buying. So I'm not suggesting you do that lightly, but if you get to see the footage, you get to see the network, the people in place, you get to interview them, you build some trust, and then you get to understand the process of why they've gone through that. It certainly helps you get some confidence to be able to do that. I think what we're talking about here is it helps you avoid procrastination, helps you buy the right asset, helps you with all of the negotiation. And what's often forgotten, and you've talked about it a bit, Twee, is the access to the network. There is an extensive network that's required to bring it all together, to not only help you put an offer in, but to actually put all the services that you need to plug into as well. And as you say, if you're buying borderless, quite often that's an intimidating process for people to find that network when they're just buying around the corner, let alone buying across the border. So I guess we can tell by by your voice, and I'm seeing you obviously here. I can tell that you're excited by that. But if you had to say the one thing, what would be the one thing that you benefited the most from using a buyer's agent?
Removing the stress and the headache of actually going through this process. It is a big process. It pretty much just sign papers, right? Print and sign papers is what we did, and just discuss with the buyer's agent. And I feel that it's shortcutted us quite significantly if I had gone alone. Actually, it's funny, but I feel like I've cheated.
Yeah. You feel like you cheated?
Yeah. I feel like I cheated.
Yeah.
I feel like I cheated because, all this effort and time to actually do this, me as an individual, I don't know. I've got this big asset now as part of our portfolio, and it all happened within the space of 3 months. This could have taken me like a year at least.
Yeah.
And even then, I don't even know if I would have gotten it right.
Well, if you go back to my definition of value equals benefit over cost, and we talk about the cost measured in terms of time, delay, and effort and sacrifice, what you've described is by cheating, you feel like you've actually got that part of the equation close to zero, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Twee, the other thing is that you bought this, like we're recording this in July of 2022. You bought that in a uncertain time as well. The market was going through a state of flux. We're getting interest rates for the first time. Can you talk to that point for me? So it's one thing to say, yep, I'm in the journey to buy investment properties, but you were buying using a buyer's agent in a very uncertain times. Can you tell us a bit about your headspace around that?
Yeah, look, with all that sort of uncertainty around interest rate rises and inflation and all that sort of stuff, I can't control that. What I can control is whether we're ready. We're ready to go. We're ready to jump. And we were ready to jump. Actually, what we did was we jumped early, because what we also did was, because of uncertainty and, house prices are high, we actually took advantage of that, Bryce. We utilized the equity that we've got in both of our current properties to actually buy this next property, right? So take advantage of the jump, release the equity that was huge, and everyone's getting this boom in their property prices. So we used that to our advantage, and we jumped early, but we were ready. We had our cash flow in place. We had our emergency funding in place. So it's when you're ready. It's only what you can control, and that's where our headspace was.
Nice. And I think below the headlines is the facts, right? And the facts are that in the areas that we would consider investment grade, there's not a lot of great property up for sale, and it's still competitive now. Admittedly, there's not 8 and 10 people looking for the property. It's more like 2 and 3, but there's still competition. And I think that's an important point for people to realize too, that below the headlines that are going on around the hysteria, around the fact that we're bringing our interest rates north to a normalized level, not the emergency lows that they were at. All of those headlines are actually disguising the fact that the reality on the ground is stock still thin, competition still strong for investment grade assets. And so being able to buy in a time, I think I can't see a case for the property market correcting based on employment, strength of the economy, still demand for immigration that'll come in the future. I find it, unemployment being so low. I can't see a case where there is anything for an asset-wide correction. There'll be parts where some of it's overshot, typically at the top end of the market. But I can't see a case for that to happen. So for people to be able to buy, if they're playing the long game, to get these quality assets with less competition, and then if they see it strategically advantageous, like you did, to use an expert to go and get it, well, then you're still putting quality assets into your portfolio that are going to serve you not this decade, not next decade, but the decade after it. So it's super important. Well, my last question for you, Twee, is this. If someone's listening to this and they had the same thoughts that you did, I'd like to use a buyer's agent, but the cost seems quite enormous, and is now really the right time to be buying anyway, with all the headlines that are out there. What would be the message that you'd want to say to them based on the experience that you've just lived and breathed yourself around using a buyer's agent?
Yeah, save yourself the heartache and pain of trying to do it going alone. These guys are professionals. They know what they're doing. They've got their team of network that they can utilize. The cost to enter is a drop in the ocean over the long term of the asset that you will get. And it was a no-brainer for me. And the next one we'll get, it'll be a no-brainer again. For us, it was just white glove service all the way. And we were so happy with our experience, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
Mate, you're playing the bricks and mortar bank account game. I love chatting with you. I enjoyed chatting with you back in the winter series. I enjoyed chatting with you again today. And Twee, mate, the good news for you is building wealth is just a maths game. That's all it is. You just play the maths game right. And the reason most people don't build wealth is because of the headspace game. So what I love about your story, and as we shared it today and as we were talking about it previously, is you are continuing to let the maths game work in your favor, because you buy these properties, you let compounding do its job. That's where the maths gets into place, and you're not letting your headspace get in the way. So, mate, it's always a pleasure. I enjoy it every time we chat, and thanks again for swinging by the property couch.
Thanks, Bryce. Much appreciated.
Oh, Ben, so it was so good to catch up with Twee. I spoke with Jen off camera as well, and they just recently went into the market. They used a buyer's agent, all the benefits that you and I have just spent the last couple of episodes talking about. But the important point here was there was a price, but the value that they saw from using that was in excess of making sure that they remember the prize. It's freedom. The prize is not money. The prize is freedom. And the way that we do that is we get into the market and we hold it for long term. And so they saw benefits from holding that. So,
well, yeah, I just love the email that they sent us, Bryce, as well. Like, you know, that's the great joy we get out of the work that we do, is that we get these beautiful emails and reach outs from time to time. And to both Jen and Tui, who sent just this lovely note to us. And I just, it's talk about gratitude and, you know, and being humble about, you know, what people are doing with it, with the information that they're getting. That's why we do this. It's just beautiful to see people taking action and changing their lives. And so thank you to both of those for reaching out. I really enjoyed their story, and I was very thankful to write back to them to sort of say it was quite amazing. And to obviously now hear that audio with you is just hopefully encouraging others to do, you know, what they've done.
It is the best part of
100%.
My world, is to go and talk to these people who are doing it. Now, folks, I declared my bias at the beginning, so I make no bones about that. I said that at the beginning. I am a buyer's agent, right? But what I'm hoping is from the last, and here's the deal, right? We have a buyer's agency, but if you go and find another buyer's agent, fine. I'm trying to talk about using a buyer's agent in general as being an add value to your service if you're looking to build a portfolio, right? So, yep, we have a buyer's agent. We're proud of them. We love our team. We think they do great things, right? But the point here is that value, I talked about at the beginning, value is trying to find, instead of just benefit over cost, I've expanded that out to be the dream outcome is to purchase the property. The perceived likelihood of achievement, well, a buyer's agent having done it is the likelihood of achievement is pretty good.
Yeah.
And then you go divided by the cost. Well, what's the time delay? We talked about that. And what's the effort and the sacrifice required by you? If you can get that lower part of the equation down as close to possible to zero, that's where the real value can happen and escalate. And I feel like that a buyer's agent does that. Yes, it does cost money, but I think the value that is provided exceeds the cost. So if you're in a position to consider that, people who I don't think should use a buyer's agent, Ben, is the majority of first home buyers probably shouldn't use it because the deposit is so incredibly hard for people to get. They shouldn't necessarily have to use that to pay for a buyer's agent when they need that for the deposit. So that might not be suitable, even though they might be able to get some advice, get some tips, read some blogs, be able to get some of those helpful, or maybe just using the negotiation only service to help. So I'm not saying it's for everyone, but if you're serious about building a portfolio and setting yourself up for the freedom that we talk about, I think hopefully we've demonstrated what they've done, how they work, what the value they provide, to show how that outstrips the cost of engaging a buyer's agent. But Ben, I'm just throwing it out there again. I did declare my bias at the beginning. So,
and I know you have, Bryce, and you and Jess and the team. I mean, I'm super proud of the work that you guys do for our clients. And so, yeah, if you are considering to using a buyer's agent, I'm going to definitely say, put us in the mix. Have a free chat with one of our team. Compare what we bring to the table, what Bryce and Jess and the team bring to the table, because I think they are the best. I'm biased in terms of saying that, but put us on the list of buyer's agents to consider and see where you land.
There you go. So, folks, hopefully that's been helpful. That's why we consider. So I'll recap why I think the top 3 reasons why you should consider. The herd is nervous.
Yes.
The war chest is getting raided, so you want to get in before the banks because the interest rates are going up, Ben. So your borrowing capacity is going to get diminished. And the third one, the mirage in the desert. People sitting back going, waiting for the market to drop. That's just not eventuating. It is just not eventuating. Good stock is still hard to find. So there you go. All right, we covered a bit over a couple of weeks, Ben. I'm going to rip into my life hack today.
Sure.
This is a shout out to one of our team, Alric Wu. He put me on to the Sous Vide. Do you know what a Sous Vide is, Ben?
No, I don't know what a Sous Vide is.
Me neither, until Alric put me onto it. But it is the best invention, right? So basically, it is something that you're nodding your head. You know what it is? It creates a food bath, right? So it's a product. It's an instrument. It looks like an old bar mix. If you're of that vintage, you remember the bar mix that you used to blend up?
Yeah.
You strap it to the side of a pot of water, Then you press the button and you say program it to 62.5 degrees Celsius, and then you put it for 1.5 hours, and then you vacuum seal a chicken breast, for example, and put it in. 1.5 hours later, come back. It is the most amazing chicken breast I've ever experienced in my life, Ben. It just rips apart, so juicy. It's been done to perfection. So then I tried it with salmon on the weekend. Did that for 30 minutes.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, it was incredible. Then last night, Ben, we got the old leg of lamb, bathed it in the leg of lamb, did it for 4 hours, and then took it out, and then I had the barbecue going, seared on each side to perfection. So my life hack today, folks, is to do yourself a favor. If you've never heard what a sous vide is, SOUS space VIDE, just go and Google it and have a look and just read the review. It is the food. I've just been sport, Ben. I'm never gonna cook any other way again. But the sous vide has been something. So Ulrich, thank you for that tip. I'm sending it out to the community to see anyone else who wants to check it out. But it is amazing. Ben, what's making property news?
I like that one. Anything to do with really beautiful food, mate, I'm in. Right, Ash, what's making property news? Well, guess who's making property news this week? It's actually PICA. I'm putting my PICA hat on, and PIPA, the Property Investment Professionals of Australia. Okay. We actually put a release out this week, Bryce, talking about inflation outstrips rental growth for more than a decade. Now, why are we putting this? Why do we have to put this research out there, which was led by Peter Kalisos, a good friend of the Property Couch and also a property academic? He put together some data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, where from June 2012 to June 2022, we analysed the CPI, the cumulative CPI increase compared to the cumulative rental growth across the country. Now, the net result is this. Nationally, 11%. So this is what happened. We found that rents increased by just 11% over that decade compared to inflation, which rose by 25.6% over the same period. So that's representing a 15% shortfall for the investor in terms of keeping up with inflation. Now, there is a lot of sentiment out there at the moment, negative sentiment towards private rental property landlords, and we just wanted to set the record straight. So I'm going to quickly read through the different capital cities to kept up with inflation. Now, in Sydney, in cumulative rent 12.5% again versus 25.6, so definitely not. Melbourne 12.5%, no. Brisbane 12.1%. Adelaide 16.7%. Perth negative, so rents have actually gone backwards by 2.7%. Hobart, the only capital city where they have exceeded inflation, 37.9%. Darwin negative 5.9%, so rents have gone backwards, and Canberra 15.6%. So it's just highlighting that as much as, yes, we understand that there is a rental crisis out there, we clearly articulated that there was going to be pressure on rents for lots of different reasons. One of them has been that they haven't been keeping up with inflation, as would be argued by some people who are listening to this, so, nor have wages. So with respect, we understand that, and we also want to acknowledge that. But what we're also talking about here in context is Sydney has the same level of rents as they did back in 2016, and Melbourne's rents are only as good as what they were in 2018. So they've only recovered post-pandemic back to those levels. Now, when you factor in all of the challenges that have been experienced from landlords around rental moratoriums, new tenancy reforms, which are a lot more expensive, we've got rising interest rates, we've got tax reform in different states and territories, land tax reforms, and we've got chronic problems in the tribunal with disputes with potential difficult tenants. And make no mistake, there are difficult landlords here too. Let's not pick sides. It's really clear that we've got a major problem that's going to get worse unless we see the governments start to do something about it. So we've talked about APRA reducing the floor rate. That would make sense in terms of taking a little bit of pressure off being able to refinance to cheaper interest rates for some, which will take the burden off the cost to the landlord. So we've got all these additional costs that are occurring to landlords, and they have been passing on some of those costs in regards to those things. So we'll be talking more about this over the coming weeks and months, because there is a real problem that all of this intervention that we're seeing and legislation changes has upset the balance in the market, and this is causing unintended consequences. So we want to be raising the profile of the property investor, the mum and dads who are trying to do something for themselves in terms of not being a future burden, providing important rental accommodation. And we've got to understand that not every renter is a forced renter. So we want to bring some dialogue and some conversation around that. And so this is the media release. And so hopefully you'll see that out through different publications, because it was released earlier this week in terms of the challenges that also are happening here. So we're definitely saying we understand for some tenants, it's very difficult. Cost of living is very high, but for also for those property owners who are providing private rental accommodation, they've had very little rental growth over an extended period of time, and they've got increased costs. So it's only natural part of those costs are being passed on to the tenants in those properties.
And joint effort by PICA and PIPA, Ben, the body for investors and the body to make sure investors are looked after. Obviously getting together to what's really, really important there. And as you say, you'll keep on giving updates in this segment over the next coming weeks and months as you see fit for that. So good work from all involved there, and hopefully we get some attention, because to borrow Antonio Mercarella's statement, property investors are sick of being ATMs for the states.
Yeah. And look, you know, there are some people who have high emotions on this area, and there's some really, you know, difficult conversations being had in social media outlets where everyone's being very aggressive and attacking certain people for these views, because they feel like, you know, they're being greedy and entitled. And we just want to try and set the record straight that at the end of the day, if you actually weigh up everything that's been happening on both sides of the fence, you'll get to a more balanced discussion and a more balanced argument. If we don't get there, it's only going to get worse. So if we continue to keep seeing the governments interfere in the market, the rental crisis will get worse and worse and worse. And it's all to do with the decisions that they're making. So we want to make sure that there's a voice for that. And the best way we can make sure that there is a voice for that, which is a good segue, if you go to the show notes, there is a link that we will put in the show notes. And if you're a subscriber to our community, we're going to email you soon about filling in the sentiment survey. So every year there's a sentiment survey that we do in support, and we've read out the results of that through the Property Investment Professionals of Australia. Well, we're doing the 7th annual sentiment survey, and we are really interested in your feedback around how it has been challenging for you as a landlord in terms of, are your costs going up? What are your intentions if we see further intervention from governments about potentially selling your property, and that will cause a chronic shortage of rental property in this country and impact its economic growth, impact its immigration program. There's a whole set of consequences as part of that. So we really do ask you to spend the 15 minutes to complete that survey, because if we get a large response to that survey, it's going to be really well received as being a good sample size of the market in terms of us telling our story, because there is always two sides to every story.
I think one of the biggest changes would be to change the perception that property investors are just fat cats with 10 properties, because the stats don't back that up. And Ben, you talked about adding to being a part of our community list. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au, on the front page, you can opt in to get our free book downloaded. That will put you into our community list straight away, and we'll give you the updates. So it just gets served into your inbox
straight in your inbox
with all the show notes. So, all right, mate, we've covered a fair bit today.
Big show, lots of content, lots of stuff to get through.
Part 2 of our series. Also, some really good intel there on what's making property news, mate. So until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
See you next week, folks. Hey guys, Bryce here again. Just want to catch you before you go and let you know, if you're new to our community, there are a lot of episodes to catch up on, but it's really important that you start from the very beginning at episode number 1. Because episode 1 through to 20 share all of the foundational pillars and frameworks that you need to know to get the best out of listening to this podcast. So I'd recommend that you start there, and the little tip is to maybe start on 1.5 speed. Now, for those of you that are time poor and don't have time to go back from the beginning, don't worry, we've got you covered as well, because we've created a binge guide that goes through all of the details and makes it easy for you to read and get up to speed very, very quickly. So if you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, you will be able to download that binge guide and you will be up to speed in no time. And whilst you're there, I've got a few extra goodies for you, because we have our top 5 frameworks that you'll learn on this podcast, as well as the Make Money Simple Again ebook, which will help you with the foundations of basic money management, so you'll have everything you need to succeed in building your own lifestyle design and getting the best out of this podcast. Now, just a reminder that anything that we cover on this podcast is not considered financial advice. We certainly recommend that you get your unique circumstances looked at by your individual advisor, and everything we talk about is just general in nature. But folks, I want to encourage you again to go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, and you can go and get all those goodies and catch up right away.